Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thanks for this day. Pray you'll bless our time together, and pray you'll give us a commitment to be people about truth here, and especially as we look at things going on as we approach the Lord's return. Bless us this week in Jesus' name, amen. Well, this week I'm going to call it, does it seem like everything is backwards? And of course I guess you could say this is looking at the coast backwards. Here's what it really looks like. So we talk about these things each week: acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding. I reference this verse every week, Daniel chapter 12, because I think we live at this time where we're going to have a little bit better understanding as we get closer. But I was talking to a good friend yesterday. I'll let him be anonymous, that way I can quote him and nobody will yell at him. But we were talking about some of the things that are going on. And he's a man, he's a solid believer. I think we probably disagree on some things, but that's okay. But he was just talking about, there's just so much going on. And a lot of the things that we've had in terms of assumptions and maybe how we ought to look at some Bible prophecy passages are maybe being upended. I can't say for sure that they're completely upended, but it certainly seems that way at the present time with the things that are going on. But this verse relates directly to what I was going to talk about today. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Now, that's a passage that Isaiah wrote. Now, Isaiah was a prophet who wrote before the Assyrian captivity in the mid 700 BC to maybe 725 BC, maybe a little bit after that. The Assyrians came in and conquered and took people into captivity in about 722 BC. And by the way, it's often assumed that they took everybody. But I think even some of I cannot remember the source off the top of my head, but as they did, the kings back in those days would do a census because they wanted to know who was there and how many people and that type of thing. And they really didn't take everybody into captivity. They took a significant number, but they didn't. I don't even think they took the majority. So there still were people from those original tribes, the 10 tribes that made up the northern kingdom of Israel, still in the land. And I'll have to get the source for that, but it was pretty good. And I just cannot remember it. And I know I'm going to get some hate mail on that. But a lot of people, when they saw what was going on in the northern kingdom, they moved to the south. In fact, it was during the reign of King Hezekiah that so many people had come to the south that if you look at Jerusalem used to be the city of David, but at the time of King Hezekiah, it expanded up what they call the Western Hill. It's actually higher than the other, like where the Temple Mount is. And they actually called it the sheepfold because so many people had moved from the north down to the south. And it says that in some of the passages of Scripture. I think Nehemiah talks about it as well. So there were, the point is, though, that there were a lot of people from all the tribes there that lived there continuously in the land, even when the Romans came in, burned the temple and destroyed the temple in 70 AD. Remember, it was another 63 years until the Romans destroyed the city of Jerusalem and sent a lot of people into captivity. But there was always a Jewish presence in the land, and I think that's significant given the things that are going on today. Now, we know that, so the pandas are now no longer in Washington, D.C. So if you got to see them, and I don't even know if they're at the San Diego, I know the San Diego Zoo had a set. I don't know if they're still there, but they went back. So this is the funny part of the update today. This is Ramirez editorial cartoon. It's too bad we can't keep the pandas and give TikTok back. It's pretty true. And this TikTok thing is a huge, huge, huge problem. So I'm going to start off with a cultural thing. I'm going to go into Gaza and the Middle East. Then I'll do a little bit on AI at the end if I have time, because I think there's been a couple of things there that are fairly significant. And that space continues to develop. And my friend and I were talking a lot about AI and how this is going to impact a lot of things as we go forward. And just remember the overarching thing of AI. When Microsoft invested billions of dollars in AI, they commissioned a study. And they spent a lot of money, probably millions of dollars for their study, because they're a smart business company. They want to make sure that their investment's going to pay off. And the people that analyzed it concluded, one of their main conclusions was that the best thing that AI was good at was deception. People that I know have used it say that it's almost very seductive in the way that you interact with it. I have not used, I've used it for a couple of background fill on images. I'm just not really comfortable using it. Because as I say, it's artificial intelligence, not real wisdom that you get from that thing. I think we need to be very careful with it. So here's the disappointing thing. This is, I said last week with regard to issue 1 and issue 2 that these were going to be, I think, bellwethers for the election, the presidential election in 2024. And it didn't go well. If you're conservative, pro-life, and believe that, legalized drugs are not good. So what we did on issue 2 in Ohio was we legalized cannabis possession and use. I don't know how that's going to go. Of course, the cannabis that's now used is much, much more powerful, even to the point of being hallucinogenic, compared to what it was originally, because they just keep breeding the plants so that they produce stronger and stronger marijuana with stronger and stronger properties. So that went through. There's also an issue 1, which was, for lack of a better term, a issue or a constitutional amendment on abortion rights. Now, it was very clever the way they did this. They framed it as a matter of personal privacy, personal freedom, and the title that they used, or the phrase that they used in the proposed amendment, was reproductive freedom or reproductive rights. Now, that's very broad. I'm sure that there's some court that's going to interpret that to mean, so reproductive rights means anything with regard to sexuality. Transgender transitions are part of sexual reproductive rights. Therefore, that's going to be done. And they essentially took away that even minors have the right to make a decision on this outside of the parents. This is going to be interpreted very broadly. The church where I teach here at Fellowship Bible Chapel is located in Delaware County. Delaware County has long been considered an important bellwether conservative county. In Delaware County, if I have my numbers correct, it passed with it approved issue 1, approved abortion rights by just under 60%, with just a little over, it was like 59.3%, I think, to 40.7%, which means even this conservative county went that direction. I didn't look at all the school board results. I know the school district that we live in, Olentangy, had school board members up, and I don't know if any of the conservative people that were running, some of the Moms for Liberty sponsored candidates. But I will tell you, the Democrats are all excited, and the word is that in every swing state in the presidential election coming up, they're going to push to have an abortion rights thing on the ballot because they think it's a losing issue for Republicans. Now, we can argue about what this means, but I want to be real. I'm sort of a pragmatist. So I don't support abortion. I think it's a sin. I don't see how you can be a Christian and support it. It's very difficult for me to come up to any other conclusion based on what the Bible says, and the Bible says about how we're supposed to value human life. But I agree with the assessment that this is not going to be, you can see the Republican candidates that are vying for the presidential nomination who are struggling to come up with a coherent position on this because they know this. They know what the polling says. Everybody was excited when Roe versus Wade and Casey versus Planned Parenthood Supreme Court cases were overturned. But if you remember, I said at the time that now the hard work begins because it did not outlaw abortion. It just returned things to the states. I'm not aware of any state right now where it's really come up on a referendum type vote like we had here in Ohio last Tuesday that it's been approved. And you can see this is front pages. Even in Virginia, Youngkin tried to nuance his run. He thought that he could gain, he's a Republican governor. And remember, every governor in Virginia that's elected is automatically a lame duck because they can never run for re-election. They're not allowed to serve 2 consecutive terms. They're allowed to serve multiple terms, but they can't serve 2 in a row. So once you're elected, you're a lame duck, which is kind of an interesting thing. It undermines the power of the governor. I think that's probably by design. But Youngkin, a Republican, hoped to get control of the legislature in Virginia. Virginia used to be a deep red state, meaning conservative. It's not. Both houses have now gone to the Democrats. Now, Ohio is still fairly deep red in that we have veto-proof, assuming all the, let's see, I'm not sure how to say this in a kind way, assuming that the moron wing of the Republican Party voted the right way with the other Republicans, the Republicans would have a veto-proof majority in both the House and Senate. We have a bicameral legislature in Ohio, and the governor's says he's a Republican too. That's, some people question that at times. But this is what happened in a Republican state, at least based on, and the Supreme Court is controlled by Republicans, ostensibly, although you would never know it. So, even the Financial Times says, did Democrats take heart from voter backlash against abortion curbs? That's not an inaccurate description. And then you couple that with marijuana rights or marijuana possession, marijuana usage passing. It's almost like, well, if you're really upset about abortion rights, at least you can go get stoned, I guess, is the way to look at it. But neither one of these are good. Neither one of these are good indicators for how the election, at least I think how the election is going to go in 2024. It's possible that there could be a massive revival and repentance, and this could change. But I'm just being pragmatic about it. This was the hard work, and the pro-life people are losing. Now, you can make all kinds of arguments. Here's what the states look like. So the dark states, those are ones that have abortion restrictions on all or most abortions. The light gray ones are the ones where abortion is legal. The pink states are where they have abortion restrictions, but they've been blocked by the courts. And then the brown states are ones where they have abortions are banned after 12 to 15 weeks. So you can see now it's pretty much the South that in the middle of the country, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin, that are hanging in there. And I'm not sure how Wisconsin's going to go. It's a swing state. So they're going to try to get this on all the ballots in all of the swing states. It's not particularly encouraging when you look at the map. and I will be honest with you, and I don't want anybody to write hate mail or anything about this. Trump came out a month or two ago and was very weak on the abortion issue. He said, well, this is, we need to back off this heartbeat legislation, which means as soon as you can determine a fetal heartbeat, abortion is banned. And so that would put a ban on abortion at 4 to 6 weeks after conception. And Trump said, and when he did that, the Democrats got really upset with him. Like they're not really upset with him on everything else already, but now they're really upset with him because they said he's trying to steal the issue away from us. And I agree with that. He's a pragmatic politician, and he stuck his finger up there and says this is not going to be a winning issue in the election. So you just need to understand that that's the way it is. And there's plenty of Republicans that support abortion on demand and that type of thing. But it's going to be, like I said, the way this was drafted in Ohio, it's going to be difficult. Now, it was interesting. The Washington Post article, I was reading about it, and I ran across an article in the Washington Post about the war in Gaza. And I started reading. I try not to do this because, I do it enough that I can't say I try not to do it, because I do it. I read through the comments. If you want to get depressed about the state of humanity, read through an entire, like somebody makes a post on Twitter that you agree with, go read the comments. For example, I like Caroline Glick. I respect her a lot. I agree with a lot of what she has to say. And she posts, and she's conservative and a Zionist and Jewish. And I'm telling you, you have to go to the translation. Twitter does have a nice translation feature. She'll post something entirely reasonable. Then the comments, responses, and replies to her post are just absolutely vicious. I thought some of the stuff we get in our comments was bad. Hers are really, really bad. So in the comments on the Gaza war in the Washington Post, there was a very interesting comment, a number of them, all in a row. And they said, well, we need to get more information out there about the atrocities that Israel's committing in Gaza, and we need to show more bloody, beat-up children and dead children. And I thought, if that's the standard, then let's do that for abortion. I mean, there are bloody, beat-up, dismembered children after an abortion, but if you put those on your timeline in Facebook or Twitter, you're done. Your count is gone before the end of the day, I think, because they don't want that truth. They want propaganda that supports their particular narrative and nothing else. They don't really want the truth. Listen, I'm not denying that there are horrible scenes coming out of Gaza. It's atrocious. I'll talk about it later, but we see the protests all over the world, everywhere, against Israel for the atrocities of Israel. We demand a ceasefire. I have yet at one of those protests to see free the hostage sign, free the hostages sign. That is a war crime. That is clearly a war crime. And I'm seeing the pictures of these people who are held hostage. There was a 10-month-old boy. They said he's now spent over 10% of his life in captivity by Hamas. I saw this video. It was I was going to play it, but it was in Hebrew, but it'll just rip your hearts out. It was this beautiful little 7 or 8 year old girl, and I've got great nieces that are that age, and they're really, really cute at that age. And she was talking about the memories she has, and then they showed pictures of her with her grandmother and her grandfather. And you could see how much they loved each other. You could see how proud the grandparents were of this great granddaughter. And then she said, they killed my grandparents. And 1,200 stories or more like that because of the dead from this inhumane, evil, demonic attack by Hamas under the guise of a religion that happened on October 7th. So it's okay to put up mutilated children if it supports your political view, but if you put it up with the truth of what really happens in abortion, you're going to get, you'll be banned on all the social media platforms, I'm pretty sure. And it's a problem. And it's going to be, if you put up, I do see people post every now and then, and we'll have to do something on Rumble about this in the future, about what happens when somebody takes a puberty blocker. What happens to their body? Go look them up. I don't know if, I think there's a guy named Brandon Showalter on Twitter, and he posts occasionally about what they do in the surgery for sex change. To change somebody, pretend to change somebody from a woman to a male, or vice versa. And I sort of got sickened when I was reading about the PVC pipe that's used in those operations, and that they will bleed and have problems for the rest of their lives. We can see what happened. We've heard about this written document down with regard to the shooting in Nashville. Part of it's been released. It's clear that that shooter wanted to kill Christian white people. That's why it's been suppressed. If that had been a right-wing person wanting to kill minorities, that thing would have been all over the newspapers. It would have been published by the New York Times. But nobody seems to be interested in that. Now, there are some rules. Glenn Beck talked about this the other day, and I will be honest with you, I've been looking to see and verify the accuracy of what Glenn had to say. I'll just pass along what Glenn said, that there are some FCC rules that are Federal Communications Commission rules that are coming out, supposed to be voted on this week, that might control a lot of the information on the internet, even if you're not on the major social media platforms. Now, I'm not sure that that's true. I'm trying to verify by looking at the proposed regulations. All I know is there does seem to be a commitment to controlling information and that sort of thing. So let's look at the Gaza thing. So we're going to talk about Gaza, a little bit of history, got some videos, and then there's some significant meetings that have taken place. And then at the end, I'm going to wrap it up with some scripture that I think puts it into context. So just look at some of the things that are going on. These are just some headlines here from the Wall Street Journal. China and Russia tap into outrage over the Gaza deaths. I'm going to play you a video from RT later about how they're propagandizing this against Israel and in favor of Gaza and the Arabs. And remember, it was 1964 that the KGB came up with the term the Palestinian Liberation Organization to give this mantle to Yasser Arafat, because that was a way to keep the West at bay. They didn't want the West to get too much power and influence in the Middle East, so they created this. Here's a series of articles in the New York Times about what's going on in Gaza. And again, I don't see, I subscribe to the New York Times, I subscribe to the Washington Post. I say that because I want to know what the enemy's doing and saying, and what they pretend to be thinking. I don't know that they think that much. It's a lot of feelings-based, but they do present some facts, and they actually do a good job sometimes. But look, this is behind Hamas's bloody gambit to create a permanent state of war. This was a front page article in the New York Times. You can see it up here in the right-hand corner, Hamas's goal for October 7th. This is from Thursday, to create a permanent state of war. And they interviewed some of the leaders of Hamas in Gaza, and they said, we want to create this permanent state of war. Now you see all these images about the destruction that took place, is taking place on a daily basis. Israel's dropped tens of thousands of tons of bombs and explosives, and they've really destroyed a lot of Gaza. Marchers all over the world are calling for a ceasefire. Here's an article here. And this is an article in the Los Angeles Times. This was on November 5th, last Sunday, page B3. Marchers call for ceasefire. But I want you to see how this was worded in the Los Angeles Times when they were describing what had happened. So they were giving the numbers, and it's difficult to get exact numbers in the midst of a war, exactly how many have been killed and that sort of thing. You know, Hamas comes out and they give their numbers, and that's what the Los Angeles Times says. Since then, more than 1,400 people have died on the Israeli side. Notice the choosing of the language. 1,400 have died on the Israeli side. More than 9,000 Palestinians. They do mention 220 hostages. It's actually, I think, 240. There have been 5, 6, 7 released or rescued. More than 9,000 Palestinians have died. No, have been killed in the war, mostly women and children, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. So at least they're citing their source. But do you see the way the choice of language was? This is a major newspaper in the United States. Israelis died in a terrorist attack, but Palestinians have been killed by Israel. And you see, and this is written by the person who did this. I think she used to work at the University of Pennsylvania. So you can imagine by the way, don't send your kids to these schools, folks. You don't know what's going to happen to them. I get contacted every now and then by people like, where should my son go to graduate school or law school or something like that? And if you're pretty solid, you can get through it. But I went to secular university for a master's. I went to secular state-run university, IU, for law school. I had some conservative professors, but I had liberal left-wing professors. I had a professor in my master's program who was clearly a Marxist. Now, you can imagine the trouble he had, right, in his career as he moved through academia. No, he ended up being the chair of the sociology and criminology department for years at the University of Colorado. Hardly a backwater university because he had the ideology that everybody wanted. I had gone to graduate school, planned to go to graduate school, because I thought maybe I would go into academia, research and writing and teaching, but it became pretty clear that I'd already decided to go to law school, but it was too late to apply, so I went ahead and got my master's. But it was pretty clear during that program that I probably was not cut out for anything other than a conservative Christian college. But I can tell you, I see what professors tweet at Christian colleges, what they believe, what they are into, and that, they use the, they, them pronoun or something like this at conservative Christian college. I don't know how they keep a job. They shouldn't be there, but that's another thing. So Israel has agreed. There's been some discussion about ceasefires, and Israel said, well, we might agree to daily 4-hour daily pauses. And part of this is they want to get the hostages. So the one deal that's been talked about is that they would release all women and children held in Israeli jails for all the women and children held by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and some of the other factions in the Gaza Strip, because I don't think they're all held by Hamas. Because here in this article it indicates the Palestinian Islamic Jihad might release a couple, but they are not. Netanyahu has been adamant, we'll do a ceasefire when the hostages are released. not a ceasefire, and we'll negotiate. And they know that this is a big deal. Back in one of the Gaza incursions, an Israeli soldier was kidnapped, and he was held for years. And they ended up, and Netanyahu got a lot of criticism for this, they released about 1,000 Palestinian terrorists that were held in Israeli jails and prisons to get that one person back. They've released Palestinian Arab terrorist prisoners to get back the bodies of soldiers that have been killed, and they've held the bodies for years. It's crazy. There are funerals all over the place. I saw another interview with a young child, maybe 12, and he said, well, trying to get life back to normal, I've got 40 funerals to go to in the near future. My understanding is about half of the victims have not yet been identified because of the condition of the bodies. And some of them were people that were 5 bound together and then set on fire. And they can't tell where one ends and the next one begins. And by the way, I appreciate those of you who complain that I go into any sort of detail about what happened. But listen, you need to understand what happened. And I am not going to stand up here and gloss over it, because what we are seeing is demonic forces unleashed in the world. And unless you understand that, you cannot prepare yourself mentally or spiritually for that. You don't have to look at all the pictures. And I don't show you pictures. And I've got thousands of them. I've got access to all kinds of videos. The other day in Los Angeles, now it was originally reported that Gal Gadot, she played Wonder Woman. She's Jewish, Israeli. She played Wonder Woman in a recent, I don't know when it came out. I don't go to movies very much anymore, really. So I know she played, they're very proud of her in Israel, that she's, this actress who got this major part. The word was she was going to screen a video prepared by the Israeli government to show people the atrocities that took place. I don't know that was accurate, but they did try to play this in Beverly Hills the other day at a place called the Museum of Tolerance. Now, guess what happened? The left-wing nut jobs that are running around all over the place now, and again, I will say, everybody says, is this like 1930s Germany? No. It's not like the lead up in 1930s Germany. It's worse because it's all over the world and it's everywhere. Even here in Columbus, this is happening. I saw a video somebody posted of a Ring camera, and the guy came to the door and rang it and stood there for like a minute, and the lady said, "What do you want?" And she had you could see an Israeli flag kind of flapping in the breeze in the camera. And then he just went into this profanity-laced thing about you blankety-blank Zionist pigs. We don't want you around here. I think he's been arrested I don't know. And I'm not against free speech, by the way. I'm not sure that we shut these people down, but some of this is not free speech. This is incitement to riots and violence and that type of thing. So Israel's doing pretty well. I think, again, I don't remember. I read about probably 1,000 articles in the course of a week. And I apologize for not posting links to everything. I could just do that if I did that. And maybe I should just stop talking and just get a Telegram channel or something. But some of this is the Financial Times. So anything I post there could be behind a paywall. Anything I post from the New York Times would be behind a paywall. But here's a Financial Times article talking about Israel's going through the wreckage of northern Gaza, and they've flattened a lot of it. Now, there's a big dispute going on right now about a big hospital, the largest hospital in Gaza. Israel contends this is Underneath this is where Hamas has their headquarters. And then, of course, they bring up Democracy Now! And these other left-wing idiot organizations. I'm sorry. I need to apologize to the idiots. But look at Democracy Now! They have a doctor on. Oh, I worked there 16 years. I never saw a terrorist. Oh, really? Like they're going to come up and introduce themselves to you. But then you can see videos that somebody took in there, and you can see the guys with the AK-47s in the background waving them around. You can see also videos that they put up where you can see the tunnel entrance there by the parking garage or parking facility for the hospital, or an entrance to the hospital. One of the things that's been a big question is, what is Israel going to do when they're done? How do they define when they're done? Then what do they do? It's been incredibly controversial. Some of the things have been said. I've got a clip I'll show you in just a minute. And you're going to see a lot of stories like this. So this is the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and it says Israel could lose. Now, I doubt that, but I want you to know, in think tanks around the world, this is the type of thing that's being talked about. So the fact that I put this up doesn't mean that I endorse this article. I want you to understand that. I do think Israel will win, but I think it's going to take a while. But I will say they're doing better. And one of the problems they have, this was a good article in the New York Times, the tunnels of Gaza. They went through and they analyzed what these tunnels are really like. And they just took one example. So they did one. Here's a picture. And this is trying to remember if this is might be a mosque or an office building. And so this New York Times talked about it. And so here's an example of a tunnel. This tunnel, in this case, goes down 65 feet to where it joins up with other tunnels. There are some of these shafts that go down 250, 300 feet, the tunnels. They call it the Gaza Metro. And so they'll have an entrance hidden up there. They've uncovered these entrances. Now, my understanding is right now they're not going down into the tunnels because they can project military power on the ground above and close off the tunnel entrances. They can destroy the places where they store oxygen and that type of thing to keep an airflow in the tunnels so they can breathe down there. But if they go down in those tunnels, it's one-on-one warfare. That's not a good situation to be in. I know there have been a number of Israeli soldiers killed, but my guess is that when they report 10,000 civilians killed, this is just nonsense. It's not 10,000 civilians. We know that 1,500 were killed in Israel in the couple days after October 7th. 1,500 terrorists that were doing this. So you have to factor that number in. So there's certainly over 400 IDF have been killed, but about 300 of them were killed initially. So this shows a little bit about how these things are organized. They're about 6'5", 6 feet 5 inches tall, reinforced concrete. They have lighting. They move their weapons through there. They have command posts throughout there. And then there will be certain places where they have, for example, they might have this tunnel. They have storage. They have tracks to move things on. This is mainly in the areas around Rafah where they smuggle things in from Egypt, which it doesn't appear that Egypt stops it. Every now and then they clean it up, just like Israel would go in and clean it up, what they called mowing the lawn in Gaza. They dig these by hand. And they've been doing it for years, and they're committed. And some of these guys never come up out of the ground. And these spam calls, even on Sunday morning. So this is this. But what they'll do is they'll put these tunnel entrances, and then they'll put like a little trap door in the tunnel down to another thing, and it'll be very well disguised. So when they go in there to get somebody, that's why they're reluctant to do it. The person will go through one of these tunnel entrances, and then they'll be difficult to find. So remember, this is a massive underground network. This is the blue areas where they've done most of the destruction. And then here's a what they call the Gaza Metro tunnels. They have more tunnels in length of miles than the New York City subway system does. That'll give you some idea as to how many of these things they have. I'll talk about this in a minute. This was a pretty significant meeting that took place in Riyadh. Marches and big march in London yesterday. I'll show you some pictures of that in just a moment. Hatred on campuses like you've never seen. Everything is backwards. It's Israel got attacked, but you wouldn't know that to watch most of the media today. Here's a little interview, part of an interview that Prime Minister Netanyahu did the other day on ABC News with David Muir, talking about a couple of issues that are coming up and that what he's dealing with.
But I don't think there's going to be a general ceasefire. It's not that I don't think. I think it will hamper the war effort. It'll hamper our effort to get our hostages out, because the only thing that works on these criminals in Hamas is the military pressure that we're exerting.
If Hamas agrees to release the hostages, then there would be a pause.
Well, there'd be a ceasefire for that purpose. And we're waiting for that to happen. It hasn't happened so far.
Do you know where the hostages are? Do you know where the Americans are?
We have some intelligence. I'm not sure it's wise to share it here with Hamas.
I know Israel prides itself on its intelligence capabilities. We now know the Hamas attack had been planned for months. We saw the training videos. Of course, we saw the thousands of Hamas terrorists swarming into Israel. How did your government miss this?
It's a very good question, because the first task of government is to protect the people. And clearly, we didn't live up to that. We had a big, big setback.
As Prime Minister, do you personally bear any responsibility here?
I've said that there are going to be very tough questions that are going to be asked, and I'm going to be among the first to answer them. We're not going to evade that. The responsibility of a government is to protect the people, and clearly that responsibility wasn't met.
But you know what I'm asking here, because so many Israeli officials, including the defense minister, the military intelligence chief, the military chief of staff, they've all taken some responsibility for Israel being caught off guard. They didn't say we have to wait for an investigation here. Do you believe that you should take any responsibility?
Of course. That's not a question. It's going to be resolved after the war. I think there'll be time to allocate that.
And look, most of the people, for example, recent polling in Israel indicates that about 70% of the people are in favor of everything. Over half, I think it's 60, 70%, think that Israel's not using enough weapons and bombs and that type of thing. So whatever division there was in Israeli society seems to have disappeared in large part, although there are the left-wing crazies, those with the Israeli version of Netanyahu derangement syndrome, that are out there protesting. Look, I don't think Netanyahu will ultimately survive this. But listen, I would not be the first person to suggest a political obituary for Benjamin Netanyahu, and he seems to always come back. That's been written many, many times. But I don't. This is a hard one to overcome because it happened on his watch. So this is Financial Times talking about the intelligence failure on October 7th. Now, listen, I get every sort of theory sent to me. And so I'm not telling anybody not to send it to me. Okay, but you need to understand, when you send it to me, depending on whether I'm in, my wife sort of does this every now and then to me. She goes, "Don't cross-examine me." Okay, so I was a lawyer, and one of the benefits of being a lawyer is you get to cross-examine people. And I heard a former U.S. district attorney from Chicago get probably the best legal seminar I ever attended, and he just said, you just control the witness. It's like take a stick, he says something and you break off a little of the twig. And then you take that twig and you shove it through his ear and you grab on the other side and then you steer him with that for the next hour. And then you ask him a nice, calm question. And then you find another stick and you break it off and he goes on. And it was very good that's how you do cross-examination. You get information. You don't have to hammer the person, but every now and then, listen, I will confess, somebody will flip my lawyer switch and I will cross-examine them about, okay, why do you think this? What's your proof for that? Because I want to know. I want to know why you came to your conclusion beyond what you feel. So I will challenge you. So just understand that you can send me things and you can ask me questions and you have a discussion with me, but every now and then you will flip my switch and I will ask you a lot of hard questions. And I think that's what needs to be done. And as I've said, I'm willing to go over there and investigate this thing for the Israeli government because I think there are a lot of really hard questions that need to be asked of the people in leadership. But there's also investigation that needs to be done on how well the other side did. Give the Persians, I'm going to use the term Persians most of the time now instead of Iranians because I just think Persians has kind of a historical, biblical ring to it and a Bible prophecy ring to it. But there was a lot of things missed, and we could sit here and we could recount that. But I don't know. And if I covered this last week, I apologize. I did a bunch of interviews this week. Last Sunday, after I left here, I probably did 4 hours of interviews on Sunday, afternoon and evening. I have an interview I did the other. No, I didn't. I haven't. I will be live. I will be on Tom Hughes tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. I did another couple hours with somebody. I did another couple hours with somebody. So I don't have a way to catalog everything that I talk about. So sometimes I'm repetitive. And you also understand that there are people joining the channel that have never heard of us or listened, so they may have missed some things. And it never hurts to repeat things. So one of the things is like, how did they know where everybody was? And I heard an interview with Eric Prince. Did I talk about this last Sunday from Blackwater? Okay, probably not. So, and of course you say Blackwater, so oh, you're just another neocon. And listen, I know all about Blackwater. I know what they're into. But if you never listen to people just because you're going to paint them with this very broad brush, Eric Prince talked in this interview on Rumble about how they got cell phone data. And they were able to determine where people were going, how these bases in the South were staffed. They were probably way understaffed. They killed a lot of them initially. I saw a video that someone sent me. It was a soldier in a base or a facility, and they were coming and shooting people. And I think the comment was made, at least they said in Hebrew, the soldier is saying, how do they know where we are? How do they know where we are? They had all of the cell phone data. It's out there. All of your cell phone data. It's out there. And they sell it. So they were able to determine where the safe rooms were because they tracked, okay, we shot rockets. This is how people moved. This is where they went. This is a Shabbat. How many people are going in and out of these bases in Israel? How are people moving through the doorways of homes in the kibbutz? Is the door open or locked? And they would be able to determine that when people came into a particular door, they never paused to unlock it. So they said that's an unlocked door. And they had maps for all of this. They had maps where the safe rooms were. And they do this because they fire rockets. And so all these times they fire rockets, they're getting data as to where people move and where do they go. I don't know what the rule is. They said, where was the IDF? Why didn't they come? Why didn't they put up helicopters? And that's what a lot of people are saying, the legitimate question. But the other question I have is, what's the rule when rockets are flying? And when the area is under a rocket alert, do they put up their expensive helicopters? I don't know. I do not know the answer to that question. But I think it's a legitimate question. So I'm going to try to do interviews with some IDF people this week, retired IDF people, to kind of get some of these answers. There's sort of a baseline understanding here, because I don't know. I'm not a military guy. But I think that I think these are legitimate questions. So here's a question. Sometimes people ask, sometimes your questions are a little bit silly. As bombs fall on Gaza, will Iran opt to sever its Hamas tentacle? This is from the Times of London, a comment piece. I'm like, I don't think they will. They'll just get somebody else. I mean, that's what they've done all along. Iran rarely sends its troops anywhere. They fight through proxies. Ever since the Iran-Iraq war stopped back in 1989, I don't think you see Iran sending lots of troops someplace. They have some proxies, they have some militias, but a lot of times they just provide the leadership. It's not too unlike the way that Russia uses the Wagner Group, or has been using the Wagner Group. And by the way, Russia's using the Wagner Group. Even still, there were reports this week that Wagner was helping set up bases, and they actually entered into some kind of peace agreement with leadership in Libya, which is kind of an interesting part of Bible prophecy. Also, within North Africa, within these Islamic areas, do you know that there was a horrific terrorist attack, I believe, on Christians in one of these countries, and 800 or 900 people were killed. At least this is what I'm hearing. Do you hear about this on the media? No. But, if a bomb falls in the wrong place in Gaza, it's all over the place. In this article, it says the evolution of the crisis now depends on 5 factors. First, watch whether a radicalized and shrunken Hamas destabilizes the already infirm Palestinian Authority. Other people on the other hand say we need to give the Palestinian Authority more control, more power. Watch the old men. The West Bank's Mahmoud Abbas, 87. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is a similar age. King Salman of Saudi Arabia, similar age. And President Biden are all in their 80s. Third, watch for disappearing red lines. Our State Department, Anthony Blinken, is running around saying, hey, we don't want this and this and this to happen. Don't do this, Israel, don't do this. And my view would be, why don't we just stay out of it and let Israel decide what they want to do? Fourth, watch out for the bombs. The Iran nuclear deal is dead. It was dead already when Iran became an arms supplier to Russia. I think this is a silly statement. In the Ukraine war, now it's even deader. Tehran will use the fog of war to accelerate its uranium enrichment to a weapons grade. If it gets a bomb, Saudi Arabia will want one too. So anyway, everything's a big mess. And so all these factors, as they say, will keep the Mideast on boil. And Hamas leaders, a lot of them live in Doha in luxury. They're not in the midst of the war. Some people are asking the question, why don't we go take them out? Now, Qatar, however you want to say it, is providing some cover for these guys and acting like, well, we're really the ones who want to negotiate the release of the hostages. But they're Muslim Brotherhood supporters, so they're not really to be trusted. West Bank is another tinderbox. They're talking about potential problems with Jordan, people coming across the Jordan River to do attacks. The West Bank is in very much disruption, and the narrative is, well, this is all the result of Israeli settlers in the area. This is not true. I mean, I can tell you story after story. We've seen this happen. People are driving down the road and they're shot dead in their car. Their cars are stone, and it's not rocks, it's stones like they used to stone people and kill them with. And if the settlers respond, oh, look at this house of settlers, they're just over-responding. And again, the question is, they destroy Hamas, then what? Very interesting article by Seth Frantzman, interview with Avigdor Lieberman. He was in one of the Netanyahu administrations. He was one of the defense minister. He talks about in the article, it's in the Jerusalem Post magazine this week, Seth Frantzman, we need to release all hostages by force. And he leads a party, I can't remember the name of it. It's the Russian Jewish Party. Where a lot of Jews came from Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. A lot of them settled in the north. I remember I went into a place to buy gas in Nahari on a nice warm day, and the guy, I'm pretty sure he had on one of those like Russian winter hats, and he was sort of talking to me in Hebrew with a Russian accent, and then English with a Russian and Hebrew accent. I was asking him, how do I pump the gas? And we eventually figured it out. He kept my credit card while I did it, though, just to be sure. But he talked about Lieberman in 2016 said, I wrote an article about this. I showed you articles by Mordecai Kadar he wrote an article in April about talking almost exactly like what's happening right now with Hamas. So he warned everybody. So here's some things from the article. What happened over the last weeks of September and the build up to October 7th attack? And Lieberman says, for about 12 days, we watched Hamas violence on our border, with some firing into our territory, shooting with guns, real violence on the fence. After 12 days, a decision was made to increase the number of workers permitted into Israel from Gaza from 18,000 to 30,000, and to increase monthly payments to Hamas from 10 to 18 million. And he's right. This doesn't make any sense unless you've been completely duped to believe that, well, yeah, Hamas is a legitimate party. For Hamas, Lieberman says it was a signal. What they were doing was a dress rehearsal before they made the final decision to attack us. And this was an approach of capitulation, a defeatist approach to contain Hamas. Netanyahu's approach was containment. And the result was that after their violence came the atrocities on October 7th. He said, well, you visited the Gaza periphery with Eshkol Regional Council head Gadi Yarkoni, who I had a chance to meet in December, and saw a lack of IDF forces on the border. Is that correct? Yeah. I asked, where are the soldiers? We didn't see any soldiers. We made a statement about this on video. I said in the video that it's crazy what is happening here. We are in bad shape. Yarkoni said that during the 12 days of Hamas agitation on the border, he didn't receive any calls, either from the prime minister or from the defense minister, to say anyone would visit them in the border communities. Not a single member of Knesset visited the regional council on the Gaza periphery. And these guys are right on the border down there. Lieberman recalls giving interviews prior to the Friday before the attack. He even remembers comparing the situation to just before the Yom Kippur War, saying it was worse. That weekend was the anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. We know now how lightly defended the Gaza border was. And it's true. He said this is Lieberman, we see the same pattern of behavior as in the South. They carry out provocations every day on our border. This is talking about up on the Lebanon border. And I think that whatever you saw in the South, the writing was on the wall in the North. Hezbollah had been waiting for the best timing for their side. Today we have 200,000 refugees displaced within Israel, out of a country of 9 million people. I visited our northern border, and they said I didn't see any inhabitants of the 24 villages because they are empty. They will not return if they see Hezbollah terrorists on the border. They saw what happened in the South. It's impossible. What about the hostages? We must make a decision to release all the hostages by force. I don't believe in deals with Hamas. They will cheat and claim some of the hostages are in the hands of Palestinian Islamic Jihad and some in the hands of other groups. I'm not sure they're able to deliver. It's our obligation to release all hostages. That could be bad news if countries like Russia refuse to condemn terror. They are afraid. The recent event in Dagestan I don't know if you saw about this. Dagestan is an Islamic part of Russia. Russia has a very large Islamic population. There are reports, have been for years, that the Russian army, by some date in the future, I think that date gets closer and closer, but maybe it's changed because they called up a lot of people because of the Ukraine war, that it could be 40 or 50% Islamic, the Russian military. And how does the leader of Russia manage that? Well, maybe you do things that the Muslims want you to do, like go against Israel. Is that a possible thing that could happen? I've been talking about this for 25 years. It's been apparent. And so in Dagestan, what they did was the rumor was there was a plane that came in from Tel Aviv, and they had a mob storm the airport, break through the security, get out to the plane, and they were demanding to see passports of people on the plane. And if they were Jewish, Israeli, they were going to pull them off of there. Now, the authorities there were able to contain it, but understand this is happening all over the place. In Paris, they're painting Jewish stars of David on people's homes and businesses. In Houston, Texas, a Jewish bakery or restaurant was trashed. Oh, I forgot to tell you. So at the Museum of Tolerance in Beverly Hills, they were going to play this video. It was attacked by pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters, none of which were shouting, "Release the hostages." They were beating on the doors of Grand Central Station in New York. It goes on and on and on. So everybody's on it. This is a picture of the emergency meeting of the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Countries. You can see the two logos up there, held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Of course, you see Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman there at the center. To his right, your left, is King Abdullah of Jordan, al-Sisi of Egypt, Bashar Assad of Syria, who, by the way, never gets asked, hey, why did you kill 8,000, 10,000 or more Palestinians during the Syrian civil war? Does anybody ask him that? That's like the death total in Gaza right now that they're complaining about Israel. But it happens in the Arab countries all the time, and nobody ever asks the question. To Mohammed bin Salman's left, your right, is Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, whose PhD was denying the Holocaust at Moscow University. Next to him is Recep Erdogan, the president of Turkey. To his, keep going to your right, Raisi of Iran. Some of these meetings that took place are unusual. Sisi had never been in the presence of an Iranian leader. That happened in Riyadh yesterday. So here's a little bit of a close-up picture. All the Islamic countries showed up. As I said, some of the most important people. They had speeches, meetings. This is the Islamic countries, I believe. You see over here the head of Dubai. When I talked about last week, he had bad divorce from his sixth wife. As I said, the principle you learn there is the sixth wife is always the one that will get you. Here is Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman chairing the meeting. Here's Salman and Raisi. This is the Iranian leader came to Saudi Arabia. In the Tehran Times, they said there's 10 urgent solutions: putting an end to the massacre, reopening the Rafah border crossing, exit of the Israeli military, cutting political and economic ties with Israel, recognizing Israeli military as a terrorist organization. This is the Iranian newspaper, of course. Establishing an international court, forming a fund to rebuild Gaza, sending humanitarian aid to Gaza, naming Al-Ahi Hospital bombing as a day of genocide, arming Gazans if Israel's relentless crimes persist. And this is from Khamenei's webpage. Some of the pictures that are there, I think it's very interesting the way he does. Power of faith determines the battle. And it's all propaganda. Look at this one, close to victory. Do you see the arm rising up from the, but do you see what the roots are? The roots is Israel, the country. You see how the map, see how this, all of Israel is Arab Muslim controlled. This is the way they do their propaganda in Hamas's own logo and in their charter. I could cite you in the charter, they say Israel should not exist. Not, well, you know, they can have a few neighborhoods around Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. No. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That is calling for the annihilation of Israel. Plain and simple. Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from up and around Detroit, she says, oh no, that's just an aspirational feeling. Baloney. How stupid do you think we are? She was censured by Congress, but it's a meaningless act. But you see in their logo, what do you see? Do you see any Israel there, or is it all Israel, or is it all Palestine from the river to the sea? And I've said this is the 1967 borders. Oh, we need to go back to the 67 borders. That would give up the strategic highlands of Israel. I say, well, let's not do 1967. Let's do the 67 borders. Let's do 967 BC. I'd be on board with those borders. By the way, they would still have Gaza. Now, so I'm going to do a couple things here. And I want you to understand that these are a couple of the milder conspiracy theories that I've been sent as to how this happened. This one happens to come from Martin Armstrong, Armstrong Economics. And I think he's a brilliant guy. Think he's really smart. He's been warning about the world economy and the U.S. economy for a long time. And eventually he'll be right. You know, his timing may be off a bit, but he writes this article. And I'm just going to tell you, there's a derangement that comes when Israel's involved. And I'm sorry, I do respect Martin Armstrong, but this, and I see this all over the place. I see this from people who claim to be Christians. Oh, Israel's doing this because they're taking out Gaza because they want to build the Ben Gurion Canal from Eilat up through the Jordan River Valley and then over to the Mediterranean. And this is a map. This is a map that happened, that came. So here's what Martin Armstrong says. The U.S. and Israel have been discussing plans to build a canal to rival the Suez Canal for over 50 years. By the way, I saw some guy put up a video and he goes, man, yeah, they want to rival the Suez Canal, he said. I'm like, you know, if you're going to talk geopolitics, like I should talk, like I knew what he was talking about, so I guess I shouldn't complain because I mispronounce things too. But that was kind of an easy one. For over 50 years, we must look at recent history to see the motives for the war occurring today. Around 20% of all world trade moves through the Suez Canal, which is controlled by Egypt. That's wrong. It's 12 or 13% of world trade goes through the Suez Canal. And when the canal is blocked, it's a big problem. Remember for a week or so that Ever Given, or whatever the name of that ship was stuck there and blocking everything. And there's usually a backup because it's just slow going through the canal. It opened in 1869. It's not deep enough for a lot of modern ships. So they have to carry a lighter load. And it's not wide enough. There are places where they have to pass each other and it's wider. But his premise is wrong. It's not 20% of world trade. He goes on, then he goes, the West does not want to rely on Egypt, a close ally of Russia, for world trade. The Ben Gurion Canal Project, or Israeli Canal, has been the proposed solution since the 60s. Where would this canal be located? Part of it would flow precisely through the Gaza Strip. Now listen, Martin, look at the map in your own article. You see the little dot, that's Gaza. The canal's never been proposed to go through Gaza because the Israeli ports are at Ashdod, Ascalon, to the north of there. His facts are all wrong. I'm just shocked. But listen, when it's Israel, you're allowed to say anything and get away with it, unless you're challenged. And I'd love to cross-examine him. Like I said, I respect his economic opinions a lot. And then he goes, declassified documents revealed that the U.S. Department of Energy was planning to take extreme measures to make this canal possible. On July 1st, 1963, a plan was outlined to create the Israeli Canal by detonating 520 underground nuclear explosions throughout the Negev desert to create a sea-level canal. And here's the report. Use of nuclear explosives for excavation of sea-level canal across the Negev desert. Written in 1963. Now, let me just suggest to you that whatever people proposed using nuclear weapons for in 1963 is not what anybody would get away with 60 years later. Can you imagine Israel detonating 520 or 1,500 nuclear bombs in the Negev? Their own people would kill them for doing that. There's things like, oh, it would be underground. So, but there again, there's the path, and it doesn't go through Gaza, Martin. And all you other people are putting this out there. Now they say, but look at what Netanyahu did. He went to the UN, and look, he doesn't even have a two-state solution. I just showed you Iranian, Palestinian, and other, they don't have a two-state solution either. So let's all just agree that it's going to be a one-state solution at some point. I know how this, by the way, I read the end of this book. I know how it works out. Book's been around for a while. So he says that was Israel in 1948. And then he takes the new Middle East and he draws this red line because he was talking about the economic corridor, right? Remember we played the videos of that everybody put up. And nobody said, oh, he's putting a canal through Gaza. They're putting a canal through Gaza. Nobody said that. But now it's okay because you got to denigrate Israel in any way possible. And I think the whole thing is disgusting. And if you don't know any better, the best advice I can give you is shut your mouth. So here it is. Look at this is at the UN, September 22nd. And there he is. Look, he drew that red line. But even that red line, if you look at it closely, it doesn't go through Gaza. He didn't say it was going through Gaza. That was the economic corridor. This is such a ridiculous thing. So here's a map. There you got the Red Sea, you got the Straits of Tiran, those islands there. Those are supposed to be given back to Saudi Arabia. This is also the area of Neom. You see there my little Neom graphic? I think that's pretty good, right? I mean, you just never get enough of that they're building. And so it's not, the best path is not up through Gaza. I just don't think it's going to happen. And you need to understand that, Israel's got a tough geography. So here, a lot would be down here to the right. This is the West Bank. That's the highlands, Judea and Samaria. Jerusalem would be in the middle there. And this little indentation right here, this is Gaza. This is the Golan Heights. And you can get an idea of the geography. Okay, so they're going to build a canal through those mountains to go through Gaza. That just doesn't make any sense. By the way, do you know what the canal would cost? $100 billion or more. What kind of revenue would they get from that? Well, the shipping traffic through the Suez Canal, which is 13% of world traffic, how much revenue did Egypt get last year from the Suez Canal? Well, if they're going to spend $100 billion on a canal, it must be $100 billion. $9.4 billion last year. So now if you cut that in half, you've got what, 4.7 billion, and you're going to invest $100 billion plus do a war, the cost of which is already estimated to exceed well over 50 billion to $100 billion, the cost of this war. And then you have all the rebuilding costs on top of it. So I'm just saying I think this theory of a canal is a bit of nonsense. So there you see a lot. There's a valley there, but they're going to have to put a big curve in the canal, and they get a big ship. You don't want a big curve. And they've talked for years about this red Red Dead Canal. Somebody proposed building a canal down to the Dead Sea to replenish the Dead Sea. And as the water goes downhill, you could use it through desalination plants and that sort of thing. And you can kind of see the graphic there of the elevation change at the bottom. But you got to go through those mountains. Then you got to go down to the Dead Sea, which is a quarter mile below sea level. And then you got to come back up. So the logistics of all this stuff just don't really make a lot of sense. So here is the canal, the Ben Gurion Canal. And here's another graphic that kind of shows you the geographical, logistical problems that exist. They're not going over those hills. I just think it's nonsense. So one of the things, though, that people are talking about is Palestinian state, Abraham Accords. Here's Jared Kushner at the Financial Investment Initiative Institute a couple of weeks ago in Saudi Arabia, called Davos in the Desert. And the guy's still around. He's managing a few billion of Saudi's money. He's still friends with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And he was interviewed at this, not an office or anything, but somebody thought he was important enough to bring to this Davos in the Desert. Here's what he had to say.
I've seen, not just in the Middle East, but also in the world and in life, is that when the forces of good are winning, the forces of evil will try to stop them. And that's really what I believe the terrorist attack was meant to do. I mean, Israel's economy was rocking in terms of all the different growth. It was a very attractive partner to a lot of people in the region. The progress between Saudi Arabia and Israel was progressing incredibly well. And I do think that poses a big threat to the forces of evil. If you have the Abraham Accords continuing and everyone coming together, that's something that obviously people will want to stop. So the attacks were absolutely vicious, terrible, that occurred, and that's really what was meant to be. So still a lot of possibilities for progress and positivity. But right now, obviously, this is a very important moment to see what's going to happen. In light of the attack, the Abraham Accords are more important than ever. Clearly, this is one of the hardest problem sets that's existed probably in geopolitics, but the end state has to look something like this, and it has to have two elements. Number one, Israel has to have the security to not be threatened by its neighbors and to be able to protect its citizens. That is absolutely crucial, is non-negotiable, and I do think a lot of the world agrees that that's something that should exist. The second element is that the Palestinian people have to have the opportunity to live a better life. And I think that if you go through the element, it's not just saying let's create a state, it has to be a state that can function and thrive, because if you don't create that, then the people will, again, find ways to blame other people instead of the leadership that's putting it there.
And look, he's right. I often joke with some of my friends about, he, every time I see him, he has on the same blue suit. How many of them does he have? Look, he's thin, good shape and all that stuff. But my question has always been, I only thought Superman got to wear the same clothes to work every day. But that's neither here nor there. So that's Jared Kushner. But remember his plan, this vision for peace, and listen, there was a lot of controversy. Oh, it didn't really propose a two-state solution, but they knew the Palestinians would reject it. Listen, I don't care if the Palestinians were rejected. You proposed it, guys. Own it. And look at what he did, though. In the Negev down here, they proposed giving parts of the Negev to the people in Gaza for industrial and agricultural zones. And there was going to be a tunnel. So they're going to build a canal over a tunnel. I don't know, the whole thing. And this was a proposal. And what do you think? Hamas rejected it. They would never accept it. They rejected it when they got back the greenhouses that Jewish residents of Gaza had built, high-tech greenhouses and other things. They came in, and did they use them to make money for their people? They destroyed them. That's how they think. You understand that this is, even though the Quran says that the people of Israel, the Hebrews, are entitled to the land of Israel. It says that in the Quran. Oh, forgot about that. I'm not going to play this. This is a RT video. Maybe I'll do it in a midweek sometime. But they're saying Gaza has all this gas and Israel has all this gas and they're trying to get gas to Europe. But listen, the United States has frustrated that. The pipeline never got built. That pipeline to Europe was going to cost $10-15 billion. The canal would be $100 billion. Nobody was going to finance the pipeline, particularly in a world that's gone completely crazy and said, well, we don't want hydrocarbons anymore. Oh, yeah, because the wind works all the time and the solar works all the time. It's insanity. So they had this meeting, this front page of the Arab News this morning. King of Saudi Arabia came out, but it was kind of interesting. They had, here's Erdogan coming in, meeting everybody. He gave a speech. And then you had King Abdullah of Jordan. You had Mohammed bin Salman said this: we affirm our condemnation and categorical rejection of the barbaric war to which our brothers in Palestine are subjected. We demand immediate cessation of military operations and provision of humanitarian corridors to the residents of the Gaza Strip. And they all meant the same thing. This is from a Twitter feed. This is accurate. This is what they wanted. This is what they proposed, that we come out of this meeting agreeing to this. And look at the ending plans to restore relations with Israel. Get rid of the Abraham Accords. Closure of American bases in Arab countries. Qatar, shut it down. Oil shutdown. Suspension of civilian flights with Israel and air closure for all types of flights to Israel. Making all demands subject to an immediate ceasefire. 4 countries rejected the proposed statement. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Morocco, and the United Arab Emirates, the last 3 of which have already inked the Abraham Accords. Some people think Saudi Arabia signed it in secret. I don't know if that's true. Here's another blog post. They talk about what they want to do. Threat of oil embargo, closing airspace. And it says here, the proposal was not accepted due to opposition of the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Bahrain, Sudan, Egypt, and Jordan. All of them, except Saudi Arabia, have a formal normalization or peace agreement with Israel. So I don't think the Saudi deal is dead. That's my way of saying this. I think it's still in the works. When the war's over, it's going to work out, particularly if King Salman has gone on to his whatever he's going to get when he dies. College campuses, lots of things happening there. This is an article from a newspaper in Cyprus, the Financial Mirror. Eastern Med Energy hangs in the balance of the Israel-Hamas war. And this is a big deal. But nothing's going to happen. There's no pipeline. There's no gas. Israel's not really supplying gas to replace the Russian gas, which is what the RT report said. It's just not happening. Get your facts straight before you put up a clear propaganda piece to denigrate Israel. Make your case with facts, not feelings and not stupid arguments. It kind of annoys me. This is a Twitter post somebody put up. Notice the picture of the temple there next to the Dome of the Rock. Kind of interesting. Here's Jonathan Spire has a pretty good article as usual. Friday, Jerusalem Post, why are the Houthis attacking Israel? And he says, listen, quit with the fiction that this is the Houthis doing this. This is Iran. It's clear that it's Iran. Nasrallah gave another speech. Like I give an update every week. He gives at least 1 or 2 big, long, hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours long. No PowerPoint. No video clips, just him talking. And so here's some of the points that he made in his speech. We're using attack drones and Birkin missiles. There is unfortunately talk about an Arab response to the Yemeni missiles and marches. So he acknowledged it comes from Yemen and that Saudi Arabia shot one of them down, and he doesn't like that. And he has again said, listen, there's no victory that Israel's shown in anything in the territory. This is, if Iran does not, and he also said Iran does not make any decisions on behalf of anyone. And then there is this graphic that shows the missiles and rockets and mortars that Hezbollah has. This is put up by Alma Research, Israel-alma.org. This is a speech from Gallant. And what Gallant said in this was, it was sort of a reference to Hezbollah in Lebanon. He says, listen, Hezbollah will do to you what we've done to Gaza. We'll flatten it. We'll flatten Beirut. Now, he's getting a lot of pushback on that, but this is consistent with what the IDF and Israeli Air Force people have been saying for some time. Here's a picture. This is from Sky News, or The Guardian. This is the Palestinian march in London yesterday, some aerial shots. This is on the great Day of Remembrance, on Armistice Day. He said, please don't do it. Let's have one day so we can honor our veterans from the World War I and II. And they said, nope, not going to do that. Here's another little video from Sky News. I don't know, hundreds of thousands of protesters in London. I mean, I've been on those streets. That's a lot of people. And they had fights and everything all over the place. Melanie Phillips in the Financial Times, or Times of London, West is left vulnerable, itself vulnerable to radical Islam. Boy, is that ever true. And by the way, what's the response of our government? I'll be done in just a couple minutes. What do they say? So Hamas, Islamic terrorists, attack Israel in just a horrific attack. So on November 1st, Karine Jean-Pierre in the White House press office released this about statement from White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre on President Biden establishing the first ever national strategy to counter Islamophobia. Just like when that transitioning person, I don't even remember if the person started out as male or female, but that did the national shooting. What was her response? She came out and said, we need to be very sensitive to the trans community today because of what's happened. Because one of yours slaughtered 6 people in a Christian school in Nashville. This is my point, is when I titled my thing today, was, does it seem like everything is backwards? It does. Okay. I'm going to play a little bit of Caroline Glick on Neil Cavuto. I will talk briefly about AI. So I'm probably going to go 10 minutes. So just so you know, and don't hold me to that. I'm not a prophet. So here's Neil Cavuto interviewing Caroline Glick. I think this was yesterday.
Former IDF ministry captain, former Netanyahu assistant foreign policy advisor. And Caroline, I can't help but go back. Maybe I've been obsessing too much on this Saudi Arabia hosted summit that features Iran for the first time in 11 years. Iran quickly seized on the PR gain from that to say they're all in agreement, but they're not all in agreement. So what do you make of it?
Hi, thanks for having me on, Neil. Look, there isn't any agreement in the Arab League among Arab leaders, and certainly not among the Saudis and the Iranians, but Iran, of course, wants to present a united front against Israel. And to a certain degree, this meeting of Arab leaders is a show of force that Iran wants, even though you do hear disparate voices like that of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who says that the hostages need to be returned.
When he says that, the expectation is that the raids and the attack lines and the strikes stop. Is he getting ahead of himself?
Look, I think that the call for a ceasefire is very much getting ahead of yourselves. You know, we have military objectives. We have to obliterate Hamas after what they did to us just 5 weeks ago. I mean, there's no way that we can coexist with Hamas after what happened. That's very, very clear. It can't continue to exist as an entity if we want to live in security and really want to continue to survive here in Israel, because we see what happens. They continue to rebuild reconstitute their power after every round of previous warfare, thanks to the international community that sends them billions and billions of dollars, first and foremost Qatar and Iran. But we can't allow this to continue. Hamas has to go. And so no matter what happens at the end of the day, Israel isn't going to be able to give up on that goal, because it's become a war for our survival. That's what we saw very clearly on October 7th, and there's no way that we can stop with anything short of achieving that goal.
You know, Caroline, I know you get this question a lot and are asked your thoughts on it, but when I keep following these protests going around the globe, pretty much to a protest, I don't want to say they're all this way, you hear that chant from the river to the sea. This is the wording used to describe the rant of these pro-Palestinian marches regarding Israel. From the river to the sea is not exactly code for wiping out Israel, but that's exactly what it's doing. Now, some might be ignorant of that, but as even Benjamin Netanyahu has said, probably not too many. So they know full well what they're saying. What do you think of that?
They absolutely know what they're saying. I think you're absolutely right. They know exactly what they're saying. They're calling for the annihilation of the Jewish state, of the largest Jewish community on planet Earth. And they're also attacking Jews all over the world with that slogan. And we see it on university campuses from coast to coast of the United States. We see it in London. We see it in Paris. We see it in Brussels. So that this is a code not only for the annihilation of the Jews of Israel, but for the annihilation of the Jews everywhere, which is, of course, what's in Hamas's covenant itself, that they call for the annihilation of Jewry. So does Hezbollah, so does Iran. So yes, that's what they're saying.
Amazing. Caroline, be safe yourself. Caroline Glick, a former key advisor to Benjamin.
Okay, so just a couple things on AI, and I'll be doing more on this in the future. This is an article in Mind Matters this week. At COSM 23, futurist Ray Kurzweil preaches the gospel of artificial intelligence. Now, this is a secular article writing about a secular guy, but understand that there are religious, end-time religion overtones to all of this. It says here, according to Kurzweil, what we've seen so far from AI ain't nothing. During his lecture at COSM on Thursday, November 2nd, Kurzweil repeated and forecast he has made elsewhere that by 2029, AI will pass the Turing test, and by 2045, it will reach a singularity. I think he's actually said 2030. If you're not familiar with AI, both concepts probably require a little explaining. So you can get that at mindmatters.ai. And just look for the Ray Kurzweil article. But this article is somewhat critical. This calls it the cult of AI. There's actually a website called cultoftheai.com. Prophesies that our salvation will be digital and frames the great religious narrative of humanity this way. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth created life, and life created machine, and machine became God. These self-described AI cultists openly admit they will see AI as a replacement for the traditional God. Also, as a preview for things that are coming up, I want you to be aware of this, that there is this. I'm going to turn the sound down on this. AI for Good Global Summit. There's a couple things coming up in the next year. They've got the COP28 in Dubai this month. Then they have this thing called AI for Good. This was a conference a few months ago, and it's all tied into the UN, just like this. And they talk about the Sustainable Development Goals that come from the UN, and it's all about climate change and AI and that sort of thing. And you can see when they do this, when they use their graphics, they're using all of this stuff. There's your Sustainable Development Goals. And it's all tied into AI, artificial intelligence, technology, control of information, control of currency, climate, all of these things. It's all rolled into one. And so they have this UN summit to discuss AI for Good. I talked a little bit about this. And there's a whole YouTube channel called AI for Good if you want to look at it. It's kind of interesting. And we have this climate. Here's one of the big climate proponents in the world, King Charles III of... By the way, do you know what that is? She's putting the finishing touches on a cake made to look like the king. It's edible. Here's a little bit more detail from the Times of London article about it. Somebody said, well, I have an ear. Oh, wait, no, I can't eat that much. Now, that's creepy, right? Yeah. You know, you would say, you're just making this stuff up. No, this was this is from The Guardian, and this is from the Times of London. So here what I'll do, I'll black that screen out. Listen, just let me, so there's a scriptural, a lot of things I could do. Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38, 39, all of these things are in play and developing. Psalm 83 talks about a conspiracy. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from Psalm 83, that these countries get together with Israel. And I'll do a whole thing on this at some point. I do plan on doing that. But Joel chapter 3, I want you to listen to a little bit. I'm going to read about 10 verses. And I could read Zechariah 12 and 14 too. But listen to this. For behold, Joel chapter 3, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations. Okay, so all has a very technical Hebrew meaning. It means all. No, really, it does. I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have also divided up my land. What are all these people talking about? Jared Kushner, proposals, dividing up the land. They have cast lots for my people, have given a boy as payment for a harlot, and have sold a girl for wine that they may drink. Indeed, and again, these are prophecies that have partial fulfillments, but there's this ultimate fulfillment that's coming in the future. Indeed, what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Sidon? Where's that? Southern Lebanon. Where's Hezbollah located? Southern Lebanon. And all the coast of Philistia. Where's Philistia? Gaza. Will you retaliate against me? But if you retaliate against me, that's against God, by the way. Swiftly and speedily I will return your retaliation upon your own head. Because you have taken my silver and my gold and have carried into your temples my prized possessions, and the people of Judah and the people of Jerusalem you have sold to the Greeks, that you may remove them far from their borders. Behold, I will raise them out of the place to which you have sold them, and will return your retaliation upon your own head. I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the people of Judah, and they will sell them to the Sabaeans, to a people far off, for the Lord has spoken. Proclaim this among the nations, prepare for war, wake up the mighty men, let all of the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. That's kind of the reverse of what's on the outside of the UN. Plowshares into, swords into plowshares and pruning hooks. This is a reverse. Your plowshares won't be into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble and come, all you nations, and gather all around, because you're mighty ones to go down there, O Lord. Let all the nations be weakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. This is a really rich, rich prophetic passage. So listen, understand that the things talked about in the prophets are all over the news today. And they're going to be on the news for the rest of our lives, I think. I don't think this gets walked back at this time. So look, put on the whole armor of God, stand firm in the faith, and act like men, because there's some difficult times coming. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. We pray that you will give us a special measure of your Holy Spirit to be able to stand firm in an evil day, and also to have the power and ability and wisdom and sensitivity to share the great gospel of Jesus Christ with those around us in the short time that it appears that we have. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.